Genesis 22, 1 to 14. When I was teaching at Heritage Christian University, I had as many students in the classroom as I had online. And so we administered all exams through an online platform. You go in, you type up your exam in this platform, and students online or in the classroom take the same exam, same time or at different times if they were out in cyber world. And when I prepared my first exam, our distance learning secretary said, Justin, I'm more than happy to come in and help you write that exam. Well, how hard could it be for Dr. Imel to write an exam? I mean, come on. I'm teaching. I can write an exam, no problem. So I wrote my exam, and I began to grade the exam for the in-class students. I began to notice that several students had taken 5 days or so to take the exam. This smart Dr. Imel forgot to put a time limit on their exam. And so they could open the exam as soon as I finished it, have it open until it was time to come in class and take the exam. Several students had done that, had passed around questions and answers that were on the exam, and so they aced the thing with flying colors until they got caught. I learned a very valuable lesson about how to prepare an exam for online platforms. You make sure you put a time limit on the exam, and they can only have it open for 2 hours, and that's it, or it closes automatically. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised to find that many of you had cheated on an exam at some point in your academic career. Maybe you never cheated, but maybe tests always made you nervous and you just couldn't perform as well as you might have wished to have done. Maybe you were one of those students who didn't need to study for an exam at all. You could just breeze right through it. You could pay half attention in class and you get there to exam day and just ace the thing without a bit of trouble. But what if God gave you a test? Not pencil and paper, not on a computer like they do at Fancy these days. But God expected you to perform some task, some difficult task. You know that we are tempted throughout this life. We read. There we go. You are tested in this life. James 1, 2. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Trials, tests of various kinds. 1 Peter 1, 6. Now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials. Test. God tested Abraham. God said, Abraham, take your son, your only son, the one whom you love, and go and offer him as a burnt offering at the place I tell you. And Abraham passed his test with flying colors. There's going to be tests in your life. That is simply the nature of living in this fallen world. How did Abraham pass his test with flying colors? How can you pass whatever test comes your way with flying colors? It's simple. You pass the test when you trust and obey. You pass the test when you trust and obey. Look at Genesis 22, 1 to 14. Genesis 22, 1 to 14. After these things, God tested Abraham. It's unfortunate that the King James and a few other translations say here that God tempted Abraham. You know that's not the case. God tempts no man to sin. God does not tempt us. He tested Abraham. You see, we've talked about Abraham's faith and how his faith grew. Abraham's faith needed to grow. And God needed to give Abraham a little nudge every now and then to help grow his faith. And God gave Abraham a nudge here in this text. He tested him to help his faith to grow. So God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Notice the way that God referenced Isaac. Take your son, your only son Isaac, the only son of promise, the only son of Sarah, whom you love. Those three descriptions of Isaac are meant to underscore just what a task God was asking Abraham to do, and just how much Abraham loved and cherished his son. So take your son, your only son, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Can you even imagine that? God's coming to you and saying, Take your son and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on the mountain I will tell you. Can't Abraham's heart had to be shredded in a trillion pieces. Here's the son of promise. Here's the child of my old age. Here's the one whom God has promised me. And God says, take him to this mountain and sacrifice him as a burnt offering. But notice verse 3 carefully. Carefully. So Abraham rose early in the morning. Did you catch it? Abraham didn't waste any time. Abraham did not sleep in. Abraham rose early in the morning. He was eager to go. Think about it. Eager to go. Not eager to go and to offer his child as a burnt offering. I don't believe that for a second. But eager to obey the word of the Lord. God had said, take your son and sacrifice him where I'll show you. And Abraham got up early the next morning to go do it, because that's what God said to do. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day. You know, Abraham had some time to come to his senses, to think about what God was asking him to do, and say, wait a minute, God, no, let's talk about this. You're asking too much. But on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. The boy and I are going to go over here and we're going to worship. And we're going to come back. Abraham wasn't trying to keep the men from knowing what he was fixing to do. He wasn't even trying to keep Isaac from finding out what he was fixing to do. Abraham really believed that Isaac was coming back. You see, the author of Hebrews said that Abraham believed that even if he killed Isaac, God would raise him from the dead. Now, I want you just to stop for a second. You and I know God raises people from the dead. He raised people from the dead in the Old Testament. Jesus raised people from the dead. Jesus was raised from the dead. One day Jesus is coming again. All the dead are going to be raised. We understand that. But just stop and think. In Abraham's day, how many people had God raised from the dead? None. No one had ever come back from the dead in the days of Abraham. Not a single solitary soul. But the author of Hebrews said that Abraham understood God, A, had the power to raise Isaac back from the dead, and B, God would do it if he had to. So Abraham said, y'all stay here with the donkey. The boy and I are going to go over there and worship. And we, the boy and I, come back to you. And Abraham took the wood, the burnt offering, verse 6, and laid it on Isaac his son. He took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. He said, here I am, my son. Notice the tenderness there. Here I am, my son. He said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, again with deep faith, God will provide for himself the lamb for burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and found Isaac his son and laid him on the altar. Notice all the effort that Abraham is making. He got up early in the morning. He cut wood. He took all the instruments he needed to build the altar and to make the fire and all that good stuff. They get to the place and he arranges the fire, the wood for the fire, the altar. He builds it. Abraham goes through a lot of trouble. That's the trouble God said for him to go through. And Abraham was going through it. And in verse 10, Abraham reached down his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. To slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. That repetition of the patriarch's name indicates urgency. The angel of the Lord had to hurry because Abraham was going to do it. God had told Abraham to do it, and he was going to. Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God. God knew anyhow. God knew exactly what Abraham was going to do, but God's putting this in human language, helping Abraham to understand what God knows. I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of the place, The Lord Will Provide, as is said to this day, On the mountain of the Lord it shall be provided. Abraham stands as a testament of those who will trust and obey. Stands as a testament of those who will pass the test. And whatever test comes your way in this life, and there will be many, you can pass it with flying colors if you will trust and obey. Last Lord's Day, we talked about how that God loves us, and because of God's love, we don't need to worry. That's just as true as it can be. But no matter how much you do not worry, not every medical test is going to be hunky-dory. No matter how much you don't worry, your spouse's words can cut like a knife. No matter how much you don't worry, your house can be gone. Family members can be gone. All sorts of tragedy can strike. Trouble can strike. Test can strike. And what do you do when you're tested? You do what Abraham did. You trust and you obey. To pass the test, you must trust. Abraham trusted. Hebrews 11, 17 to 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. I love the way the author of Hebrews puts it. It didn't say he tried to. He offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, Through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. Abraham trusted God. Y'all stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over yonder and worship. Dad, we got the wood, we got the fire, we got everything to make the altar. Where's the lamb? God himself will provide the lamb. Abraham stands as a testament of trust. You must also trust God. Paul learned a great deal about trusting God when he was in Asia. He wrote in 2 Corinthians 1:8-10, "We do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength." Oh, God won't give you more than you can handle? Well, one, God doesn't do it. But second of all, we were utterly burdened beyond our strength, beyond what we could handle. Paul said that right there. He said we had more than we could handle. Was that out the window? Beyond our strength. That we despaired of life itself. Paul said we wanted to die. Indeed, we felt that we'd received the sentence of death. But that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He delivered us from such a deadly peril, and He will deliver us. On Him we have set our hope that He will deliver us again. Paul outlined right there 3 ways that you can learn to trust God. Told you exactly how to do it. 1, and only God can help. There are times in life that there is no mortal being who can help you. None. The pain is too deep, the sorrow too great, the trouble, the mountain you got to climb is too steep. There's no one who can help. Paul learned that lesson in Asia. And he said all this trouble we had more trouble than we could handle. That was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God. Second, God raises the dead. Paul said that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. You see, there is hope. No matter what life throws at you. Because Jesus Christ is going to resurrect you. Give you a home with Him in glory. No matter what trouble, no matter what trial, God raises the dead. And on Him we have set our hope, Paul said, that He will deliver us again. Know that God will deliver you. I cannot promise you that every trial is going to turn out okay. That every test is going to be hunky-dory. I cannot promise you that. You know that. God may not deliver you in this life. Now, the doctor may come in with bad news and there's nothing that can be done. It's over. In this world, but only in this world, God will deliver you. He'll deliver you from this world into His everlasting kingdom. Into that better world where there is no sin and no sorrow and no tears, no death, no grief. We have set our hope on Him that He will deliver us. Know that God will deliver you. You must trust. But to pass the test, you must also obey. To pass the test, you must also obey. Abraham stands as a testament of obedience. Abraham obeyed God. Again, the author of Hebrews recounts his obedience. Hebrews 11:17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. God said, offer up Isaac. Abraham offered up Isaac. To Abraham, it was that simple. God said, here's what you do. Abraham didn't question. He didn't argue. He didn't say, but God, have you thought about this, that, the other? He obeyed. You also must obey when tested. Here's why I say that. Not only did Abraham do so, it's what our Lord taught. Jesus said in Matthew 7:24, the end of the Sermon on the Mount, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Think about the import of that statement for just a moment. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them. Wise man who built his house on the rock. Jesus said, obedience is the bedrock of your life. The bedrock of your life. And when you are tested, when you don't know what to do, what better thing to do than go back to the bedrock of your life? The bedrock of life, obedience to God. Think about Abraham. Can you imagine what Abraham had to be facing? Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering where I will show you. God, what about that promise you made? What about that promise to make of me a great nation and bless all families of the earth through me? God, have you thought about what I'm going to tell Sarah? God, do you mean you want me to sacrifice the son in my old age? The son you've promised me for years and you finally let me have, and now I'm to take him and sacrifice him? God, have you thought about this? We read this narrative. We see Abraham as a hero of trust and obedience. And it's easy to read this as though Abraham is a character in a book. No, he's not. He was a real human being who lived and walked on this earth. And God commanded that real, live, breathing human being to take his son and sacrifice him. He had to be facing a whole lot. But you know what? Abraham went to that bedrock of his life. Obedience. And he did what God commanded him to do. And that is why Abraham can be the father of the faithful. Because when life was turned upside down, he went to that bedrock and he obeyed. What about you this morning? How is your obedience? Can you honestly say, honestly, that obedience to God is the bedrock of your life? You need to make obedience the bedrock of your life this morning as we stand and sing.